Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you to all the organizers for this great event. It's a pleasure to be here. My talk today is called Designing Lightning Wallets for the Bitcoin User. So yes, I'm talking about UX, but really, UX is a lot more than just what wallets look like. It's from BIP39, making backups much easier, to anything that we can imagine to make it easier for people to use Bitcoin. I am Patrícia Estevão. I'm a UX designer. I've been working with Bitcoin-related projects since 2015, but since last year, I've decided to go full Bitcoin, so here I am. As a UX designer, I've been very interested in the development of the Lightning Network because, well, it not only brings new use cases, but more importantly, it brings a potential for much better experiences for users on new and old use cases. This potential, though, is not a given. We need to work towards that direction. So earlier this year, I've published a preliminary research on the UX of the Bitcoin's Lightning Network, which some of you probably have seen. For those who didn't, the research is this last link here, but it's also on my website. And since the research is online, available for everyone who wants to read it, I decided to talk today about the design of a Lightning wallet from an approach that I find much more fundamental, which is preserving the mental model a user already has of a regular Bitcoin wallet. I'll also be sharing some recently developed wireframes of a Lightning-enabled Bitcoin wallet, just to help me explain my point here. And keep in mind that wireframes are basically a blueprint of the interface, so we won't see any defined style elements here, such as fonts, colors, anything like that. First thing I like to make clear when I'm talking about design and usability in Bitcoin is why should we care about usability? I'm not worried about having the prettiest or coolest interface that will make all Snapchat users want to switch to a Lightning-enabled Snapchat. Building toys is not Bitcoin's ultimate goal, at least for me. Usability is about how easy it is to do something. Literally, that's the best definition for me of usability, how easy it is to do something. If people don't know how to use the systems they are using, because they are victims of a bad usability somehow, then they are more likely to make mistakes. And in Bitcoin, mistakes are translated into irreversible financial loss and privacy compromise, which is something we certainly want to avoid. So that's my pretty straightforward stance on why usability is so important for Bitcoin. And if we really want to make all those revolutionary things happen, like releasing people from the fiat money slavery, then we need to build usable interfaces for them. Over the years, there has been some effort put into Bitcoin interfaces in order to make them more usable. And wallets even developed a kind of natural pattern among the different implementations. So users have developed a mental model of a Bitcoin wallet. This mental model thing simply translates to saying that users have a representation in their mind of how a Bitcoin wallet works. And that representation, be it accurate or not, will define their expectations when interacting with it. So how do we introduce a Lightning Network wallet that can be easily used by these users I'm talking about? Lightning is a completely new technology that is being put on top of Bitcoin. So it's natural that there are new concepts, new names, new techniques, all sorts of things to keep us busy in learning and developing new solutions. But let's not get ahead of ourselves in wanting to share all these cool things with the user through the interface. If they are interested in learning them, they read about it. Complexities in the interface are not cool nor features. They are only sometimes necessary evils, because systems work in complex ways and abstractions can only go so far. But a good interface will remove any unnecessary complexity and do its best not to break the user's mental model if that can be avoided. I'm going to show now a few mockups of a proposed Bitcoin wallet interface that also has the Lightning functionality. The main point here is to illustrate that a Lightning-enabled Bitcoin wallet doesn't need to break the Bitcoin user's mental model in order to accomplish its purpose, nor ultimately does it need to be separated from a regular Bitcoin wallet. So let's take a look. This is a familiar concept of what a payment page looks like for Bitcoin users. They expect to see the address and amount fields, and maybe a label field for organization purposes. So all of which can be automatically filled if they scan a code that already has this information. And usually there's the priority choice that will influence the fee they're going to pay. So how is a Lightning payment different from this? Does it need elements that will break completely this concept? Or, how I say in design, does it need to break the conceptual model of this wallet? For me, the answer is no. This is the same wallet screen here, only now it was filled with information for a Lightning transaction, actually for a blockchain transaction on the left, and for a Lightning transaction on the right. So in both cases, an address or payment code will be inserted as an input, whether by scanning a QR code or pasting it from somewhere, and the wallet will be able to parse that input and give an immediate feedback on whether it's a Lightning or a blockchain transaction. Here, this feedback is shown with the appearance of this chain icon on the left and the Lightning icon on the right. As further identification, we could use, for example, changing the background color, making this input rectangle have a specific color for each type of transaction. The advantage of that is that it makes the interpretation of this feedback much easier for users. So after that, we have two sections that are very similar in the two screens, which are the amount and the label. The amount should be filled in Bitcoin or in fiat, as we know, and the complementary field will update accordingly. This is also a type of feedback for the user. The label is merely for the user's own organization, which will be shown in their transaction list later. So that way they won't have to burden their memory with an information that the computer can easily store for them. And of course, if they are scanning or pasting a code that already has this information, it should be auto-completed by the wallet. The main different element in the two cases is the fee part, because the fee plays a bigger role in determining the confirmation time in the case of the regular Bitcoin transaction. So here, the wallet could use this identification of payment type that it already did on top and choose to display or not the choice of transaction priority. Well, so here we see that the transaction priority is shown on the blockchain case and is not shown on the Lightning case. So now this is a common mental model of the request page in Bitcoin wallets. It is defined by an address that you share with the person who is paying you, and optionally with the insertion of the amount you want to receive. Although not so commonly seen, a label would also fit in a good conceptual model for this page to help posterior identification of the transaction. So everything pretty standard so far. What about a Lightning request? It's quite the same, except that since the type of code generated as a request is different, users will have to first select if they want to receive a Lightning or a blockchain transaction. So the interface would have these two modes we see here. The blockchain is the mode selected on the left and the Lightning on the right. The choice of mode is made by the use of this toggle button on top. And to avoid mode error, which is the user thinking he was in the other mode while performing an operation, we can use some key design elements to make clear which mode is selected. So here the toggle button not only allows the choice of mode, but it also indicates which mode is selected. And as an additional differentiation, this mockup suggests that the background color could be different in each mode as well, to facilitate the recognition by the user. So we avoid that they can make this leap of using the wrong modes due to not paying enough attention. But just note that background color or any type of color differentiation is never suggested as the only means of conveying a message to the user. Otherwise, we would be very unnecessarily excluding colorblind users from an important wallet communication. Now, that's all very good in preserving the user's mental model, but what about the channels that need to be managed in a Lightning wallet? It's quite inevitable that users will have to come across the concept of channels, because even though there are big expectations of having a fully automated network discovery, that depends on technological developments that still have to be matured and polished. However, it's already possible to design a wallet in a way that channels have a minimal interference with the user's most regular activities. Opening a channel manually, like it's shown in this mockup here, should be the last resort when the wallet can't find a route to complete a payment. Or maybe an advanced option for users who want to do this sort of thing. In any case, there is no reason to have this option laying around the main pages or such prominent parts of the interface. The option can surface contextually, like in this example on the left, where the route was not found to complete the payment, and this error message was displayed at the bottom of the payment page. And it allows the user to go straight to the open channel page by clicking Connect. So that's a very specific case where the user needs to open a channel manually. Or it can also be found as an option in a settings page or some advanced section for people who want to do this sort of thing, like in this example to the right, where this settings page has a Lightning Action section in it. Similarly, the channels page, where you see your channels that are open, pending, etc., should exist, of course, but in the regular day-to-day use of the wallet, it should be no more than a curiosity. The channels will be used by the wallet to route payments, but users don't need to interact with them in that sense. It's like what we already do with the regular Bitcoin wallet. I mean, the wallet chooses who is it going to connect to in the network. You don't have to do it by hand, even though there is this option in some software for more advanced users. And if users want to settle money out of Lightning channels, which is something they genuinely might need, they can have a more prominent option for this, for example, on the wallets page. But they don't need to see anything about channels in doing so. They can just say the amount they want to settle, and the wallet should take care of how many channels need to be closed to fulfill that amount. And this mockup shows exactly that. Users see the amount available as Lightning funds on top, then they determine how much of that they want to take, and finally they choose a priority, since this will take place using a regular Bitcoin transaction to close the needed channels. The channels page itself can be nested in an advanced options section as well, and it will still be possible for users to perform operations such as manually closing a channel they specifically don't want to keep open. That way, we can build a Lightning-enabled wallet that can be promptly understood by a regular Bitcoin wallet user without having them building a whole new mental model of this type of wallet. At the same time, we will be serving the more specific needs of this type of wallet, like eventually having to open a channel by hand. Note that the same navigation bar is used in all the mockup pages, and it doesn't display an option relative to channels. If we look at the icons from left to right, we see that they refer to the wallets page, which is where you see your balance and past transactions, then to the send page, the request page, and the settings page. So all of these pages have a higher place than the channels page in the defined visual hierarchy of the wallet. This means that these pages are more needed in the daily use of the wallet, and therefore should be made more accessible to the user. So apart from the Lightning mode that we saw on the request page, the only information regarding Lightning-specific operations that are useful in the user's common activities would be the differentiation between types of transaction in the transaction list and a separation of the total amount of funds in the wallet, making it clear what is committed to the Lightning network. And this mockup of the wallets page shows how these elements could be put together. We are going to take a closer look at each part. So on the top, we have the total amount of funds in the wallet, as well as the separation between Lightning and blockchain funds. Note that the Lightning funds value is represented with a link style. In design, we would say that it is signifying a link which affords clicking. This just means that we have a perceivable indication that this text probably can be clicked to trigger something. And the idea is that this could be the trigger to the option of settling money out of the Lightning channels that I've showed a few slides ago. On the middle section, we have the list of past transactions. Each transaction is identified here by the use of these icons on the left, and only basic information is shown about each transaction to avoid clutter and to improve readability by users. And it includes the labels that could be added during the send and request operations. The more detailed information about transactions would be displayed in a transaction detail page, as usual, but will not be seeing this page here. And besides the regular navigation through the use of arrows at the bottom, this list also offers two types of filters: the Lightning versus blockchain filter and the sent versus received filter. They purposefully have different styles to signify that they function independently. For example, I can select both the blockchain and received filters at the same time, as to limit my list to the subset of blockchain received transactions. These filters can be of great help in making the finding of specific transactions more efficient to users. So that concludes our wallet tour. But there's one more thing I'd like to say, that it's kind of more important than all the suggestions that I've made so far. Design decisions are ultimately made depending on who is your target user, of course. I've been talking about building a wallet for non-technical users who need all the guidance they can have from the interface in order to build their mental model of it. Which doesn't mean that it's not a useful wallet for technical people. After all, in our daily life, we tend to prefer speed and comfort rather than over-control and personalization. It's actually safer that way, usually. But all of this can be made differently if you're building a wallet focused on people with technical knowledge. The people that might want this control of opening and closing channels manually as a prominent feature that they will constantly use. But that would be a whole different story. When it comes to complex systems, full of abstractions such as Bitcoin and the Lightning Network, we should aim for interfaces that communicate enough to the user so they can perform their tasks successfully and know how to face some situations when the actions don't have the exact desired effect. And to be honest, it's already hard enough to build interfaces that explain themselves to the user in Bitcoin-only wallets. So if wallet developers for the Lightning Network don't make an effort to make their contribution as subtle as possible on the interface side, we risk ending up with a bunch of geek-only tools that will be a lot of fun to us, but practically useless to most users who need Bitcoin. Now, it can be too early to be able to provide these types of interfaces that I'm talking about, because the development of the Lightning Network ecosystem itself is still in its early days. In that case, maybe we should take a step back and think if now is really the time to promote interfaces that are super user-friendly and that anyone can begin transacting right now. If the network and its tools still need time to be developed, then take the time and use the lack of usability of these early-stage interfaces as a lockout to keep novice users who might not want this risk away from the system while it's too premature. So this might too long didn't listen for this talk, which is basically the main messages that I wanted to leave with you today. We can build Lightning tools that don't necessarily break the user's mental model. Lightning wallet interfaces don't need to be very different from Bitcoin wallets after all. And finally, it's our responsibility as tech creators to deliver it, to create this usability. So I hope you keep those in mind when developing Bitcoin applications on top of the Lightning Network, be it directly on the interface side or on the backend systems that will ultimately interact with the user interface. Because really, if we don't build a Bitcoin with the usability that communicates the values we want for Bitcoin, if we don't build a Bitcoin that is focused on decentralization and privacy for users, then someone will build their Bitcoin with their usability and their values, and it might not be the view of Bitcoin that we want. So, thank you.
Hello, thank you for your talk. My name is Igor. So my question is, with Lightning you usually have two numbers, the amount you can pay, outgoing balance, and the amount you can receive. How would you display this for the user? Because this might confuse the guy. He wants to receive the payment, but he has no liquidity which is going to him.
So let me think if I got it right. You're asking how we would display to the user if he has enough funds on the Lightning channels, like that?
Incoming. Well, he has liquidity outgoing from him and liquidity coming to him. So he can receive $5, but no more than that. And he can at the same time spend $5. This is two numbers which can confuse the guy. How would you display this? Like two numbers, how is that going to be?
Well, I don't really know how this is implemented in the backend, but ultimately, it would probably be an error message, like saying you don't have these funds or you can't do this transaction. But the idea is that most of the hard work would be done at the backend. So hopefully this kind of problem won't get to the user. But so, I'm thinking like forwards.
Okay, so it sounds like the most important number is the amount the user can spend, but not the amount he can receive. So once he tries to receive more than he's able to, you show the error.
Yes, so that's actually a good point. we can think of something to display it, like making it clear that it's the same amount he wants to receive. I didn't think of that, but that's something, definitely something worth looking into.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi. At
Who
the
am I
back.
looking at?
All the way here at the back.
Ah, okay.
Hi. Thank you for the presentation. I have a few questions. On the slides, I noticed that it said change pin, and it also said see backup. So, and I might be totally wrong here, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but as a security guy, I don't want to change my pin on the application, especially if it's on a rich OS in a not secure environment, and absolutely not see the back. I think by back I mean mnemonic. So on a not secure environment, and then something that I is something security by design. There was absolutely nothing about security. It was mostly about UI and making it seamless and all that, but for me, security should be by design, and I might be totally off here, but I felt that if things go wrong, you are probably going to add patches on the top of it, which is, to me, not the way to go. And again, I might be totally off here, so what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so the first part, you were talking about the settings page that included the option to see the pin and to change the pin and things like that. First, this is not the focus of this interface that I've built here, but to be very honest, I kind of took that from a wallet that I usually trust, which is Samurai Wallet. They are usually pretty privacy focused, and they have this option. But I didn't really think it through, like, I'm not building the wallet here. And as for the part that you only saw UI and everything, so my point here is that being easy to use is a very big important part of security, because you probably can manage a wallet that is very complicated and that has a lot of privacy settings and options, but most people outside this room can't. And the important thing here is to avoid them making mistakes and avoid them losing their money or compromising the privacy because they really don't know the system that well. It's just a way to make it easier for them to make things more smooth. But I totally agree with your preoccupation, so...
So my suggestion is to make things easy and smooth and seamless for the user by implementing security as a core level to start with. I think that will help a lot in the industry. That's just my thought.
No, yes, absolutely.
Right, and another thought would be maybe, and I'm not sure if this is even feasible on a large-scale hardware level, but to see if we can add this, what you just presented, I think it looked lovely, to put it as a trusted application inside a secure enclave, not in an unsecure environment. Just because we can, as software engineers, or maybe we don't have access to hardware, but to think how to make things more secure and seamless and fun and beautiful and all of that. Just,
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for your talk. I think it's really critical things to think about. And so there was one question before that was about how to express how to receive money with Lightning. It's frankly speaking, I think that for a mobile app, if we want users to use it, actually this feature should be dropped, like that the user cannot receive money. It's sad, but I think it's very hard to build a mental model for them to understand what's going on. So I was thinking also about how to make a UX that can allow to receive in a second time later. And I was thinking, so in current day, actually, users are already doing things that are very difficult. When you try to do a wire transfer, the websites for doing it is very clunky and broken, and it doesn't work every time. I have like 4 or 6 different credit cards, depending if I'm my company, myself, if I'm in Europe, if I'm in Japan, just because some are blocked in some countries, others do not. So it's like the classic system is already very difficult to understand. So I thought that another mental model that you can make with Lightning is to consider like Lightning channels, kind of like a type of prepaid card that they can be that they already know how it works. So like when you open the channel, basically you are creating a prepaid card with somebody else, and then you transit money, and then it gives you the right to get back money. So how do you think about this mental model of prepaid card, basically?
So it's great that you're thinking of it, because that's exactly my point here. We should think of this stuff to help users. I didn't really think of the credit card, the prepaid credit card model, but well, definitely gonna look into it. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, well, yeah. Yeah, hello. So first of all, I would like to thank you for working on this topic. I think it's both an important and a challenging task, and I think something that's both challenging and important. These are the best kind of things to work on. But the question I wanted to ask was basically how you want to visualize the fact that in the Lightning Network there is a limitation on how much you can receive. But now that I have been thinking about it, I think I already know the answer about that. It's you don't show that to the user. You just pretend that there is no limit to how much they can receive, and you blame the paying party. You tell the person who is paying that they must open a channel to you if they don't have a route. I think that's just sufficient. But more generally, I think my question is, how do you think we should deal with technological reasons why something is not possible? Like in the Lightning Network, maybe some of your funds are used in another ongoing transaction, or maybe there is no route temporarily or permanently to a certain thing. And these impose restrictions on what the user can do and cannot do. And do you have some sort of general philosophy on how to explain this to the user when the user may not be familiar with the underlying technology?
It was like this last part that I really didn't hear. I don't know, talk.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, you have some complicated piece of technology that sometimes places restrictions on what is possible and what is not possible. And the user may not be familiar with that underlying technology. So is there some general philosophy that you can follow on how to make a user interface for that, how to explain to the user that something is not possible at the moment?
Yeah, yeah, I think I got it. Well, there is a lot to be figured out on Lightning itself. This is like a view for the future. I know this is not like possible to be implemented right now. I mean, just think of it might be, but it's not a good idea. We should wait a bit. There's a lot to be done, and all these things we need to know exactly what will be possible and what will not be possible to keep on the backend side. Of course, there are things that are going to be strange and that will have to pop up to the user. So yeah, they will have to deal with that. But we have to minimize that to the minimum possible of new things that they can do without. It's basically that. So I don't have a specific answer for you. It's just like we have to wait and see and think what we can build on top of it. So.
Yeah.
Wonderful presentation. It's very interesting to explore the user interface world more deeply because we need it. And one short answer for the representation of the channels. Maybe it's a good metaphor, the abacus metaphor, because the abacus metaphor with all the balls, because it represents a lot how the channels are unbalanced or balanced. And another thing that is currently unexplored is the representation of the amounts in general. Because humans are very bad in figure out numbers. And I've always dreamed about a wallet which gives me a graphical representation of how much I have. But I wouldn't know how to represent it in reality. But it would be very interesting to find something like that, in my opinion.
Okay. Yeah, we usually see, when there is something like that, we usually see like the variation of your funds in the wallet. I don't know, because you could have like 1 Bitcoin or 200 maybe. So, well, you can think of it.
Hi. Thank you. So, you know, as a merchant, what I want in a wallet UX is a UX which will enable a user to craft the transaction that I want to receive, right? So you talked a lot about the UI, but I want to talk a little bit about the UX as well. So your presentation assumes, for example, that there's a Bitcoin URI and all the fields get filled up automatically. Do you think that we should find ways for merchants to better communicate to users via the wallet how the receiver wants the sender to behave? For example, let's say that right now my service, I only want to accept replace by fee transactions because I don't want to do child pays for parents for one of my users if he doesn't know how to do it. Let's say that my service, I want the user to select a 3-block fee. Let's say that I want the wallet to broadcast this before a certain time, otherwise the wallet would refuse it. So there are ways right now that we communicate with users via BIP21, which is the Bitcoin URI, and most merchants will also have other stuff that's not in BIP21. Say like, don't forget to put a high fee, don't do this and that. Most of the wallet developers, they will kind of hard code their preferences as default behavior for the users and allow some opt-in. What do you think about merchants deciding what's the default behavior of a transaction via a QR code and users opting out? For example, you could instruct users' wallets to construct the transaction in a certain way instead of just telling them how to do it, or instead of just relying on whatever wallet the developer's preferences were.
Yeah, so I don't think there's an easy answer for that. I mean, I really don't know the possibilities of which information could be could be added to the URI, but that usually is the most straightforward way to do that, because, well, it would be a matter of like having wallet developers that build a wallet with the easy default settings that you're saying. I mean, it isn't like great for the experience to have them messing with a lot of settings in each transaction, but I do realize that it might be a necessity for you as a merchant. Thank you. So yeah, I don't have an easy answer for that. The best would be to put more you can put on the URI. It's basically that. Other stuff you would have to communicate with the user and see if they can get it in the wallet, like if they can get it done the settings they want.
Yeah, so just maybe to build on that just really quickly. So do you think the merchant should kind of be the one that decides what the default behavior of the user is, or it would be the wallet software that he's using? Well, which one do you think is better for the user, like more simple, quicker?
I think that's up to the wallet builders, but it can be a wallet that is being like directly influenced by a merchant group, for example. It can be a wallet that the team of developers talk with merchants. But you can't really like expect people to build a wallet without having like their values put in the wallet, their preferences. So, but I would certainly recommend to have a wallet that talks with merchants, and maybe you should recommend that wallet on your site. Thank you.